Hi, this is Lynn Langett. This talk is AWS for the Database Professional. Looking at AWS is always a great consideration because they are the market leader, they're usually the cheapest, and they're most often used in production. We're going to look at this particularly for database people, but we're going to look at compute, data, and more. So this is from the main screen. There are many services that AWS offers. We are going to look at the subset that I personally use and that I use as a particular big data and cloud architect. The first service we're going to look at is their infrastructure or virtual machines. So EC2, which is basically VMs hosted on the Amazon cloud. Again, because this is for data people and particularly Microsoft people, I'm going to focus on what's available. By default, these are Amazon images with SQL Server on them. Of course, there's many other kind of databases or virtual machines you might use, but it's just a good starting point for us to understand EC2. We'll sign into the Amazon console and go to EC2. And then I'm going to go to Amazon Machine Images to find a pre-built image. Of course, you could use your own. And I'll pause while I filter. I've set the filters for the machine images to public Amazon Windows and then further filtered by SQL 2014 English. And you can see that we have the RTM 2014, and I'll select the Express Edition for a quick setup. And you can see down underneath here, this is information about this particular instance. Notice that it's going to be using what's called an EBS drive, which is a type of a file system. And then I'm going to click Launch. I need to set the size of the image, and if I'm just testing, I could use a micro instance, which is free tier eligible. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a general purpose, and I could just review and launch if I wanted to. Then I can just preview and launch. I need to use a key pair for security, and I can go ahead and go back to the console and see that it's pending, and I'll pause until it comes up. Now it's running. I can give it a name. It's initializing. I can launch more like this. I can make an image from it, and I can get the Windows password. Notice this can take up to 30 minutes. So I'm going to wait at least 15 minutes to get the password. While we're waiting for this, I'll just run through a couple of other things. You notice we have instances, spot requests, and reserved instances. Spot allows you to request an instance at a certain price. So you request an instance, and then you set the price. A reserved instance is when you know that you want to work with an instance for a while, and then you select the term, the utilization type, and then you say add to cart. And then you can see how much it is. And you can use ones owned by you, public, private, or 500 open source at the AWS Marketplace. And you could pick things like big data, and you could have certain AMIs that were already set up. When you're done with working with an image, you can snapshot it. So you pick your volume and then you snapshot it, and you can use that for future. In addition to the compute, you're going to have to configure the security, the IP address, load balancers, so on and so forth, and then you're going to configure the scaling. You can see now that this is running. So we're going to get the Windows password. Now I've decrypted the password, and you can see that I have this password which I need to save, and here's my public DNS. So I'm just going to save these values. And now using remote desktop connection, I'm going to go ahead and connect. And now I'm connecting. And it's setting up. And here I'm starting with SQL Server 2014, which was pre-installed on this image. And here we're connecting to SQL Server 2014. And we have the Express Edition. Now, in addition to working with your instance through RDP or through here, there are some other tools. You can use a command line tool, you can use PowerShell, you can also use Visual Studio. So I've got 2012 here. I'm going to say View, AWS Explorer, make sure I'm in the right region. So I want to make sure I'm in the right region here. And then I want to refresh, go to my instances. Notice I could launch one from here, view my instances, and here you can see my instance. And I can do the same things that I did inside of here, inside of the console, inside of Visual Studio. So notice that I can stop, which is really important because you're going to save money that way. So if I refresh, I'm stopping the instance, and that way you're just paying for storage. So you can manage your instances here. And again, just to show you that, if I go out here and I refresh, you can see that this instance is stopping. And once it's stopped, I'm going to go ahead and terminate it. I could snapshot it as well. Now notice the instance is stopped, so what I can do is I can start it up or I can terminate it. And if I terminate it, that's basically deleting it. And it tells me on EBS, this default is the root EBS will be deleted. Okay, and say terminate. And then I can go ahead and terminate the instance. So the next thing we need to think about on Amazon is storage. We saw EBS, which is a type of a file system storage. In addition to that, and for file system, Amazon has S3 for sort of daily usage and out, and long-term storage is Glacier. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this. The idea of a bucket is sort of like a drive, and then you have folders and files inside of it, and Glacier has a vault. In terms of storage, you can use S3, which has redundant storage for EC2, or you can use EBS. So you can make persistent AMIs and you can expand it, and it's a little bit faster. So I'm going to show you now S3 and Glacier. So S3 basically has buckets, so they just have names, and then you set the location, whether you want it logged or not. And then once you create a bucket, inside of the bucket you can create folders. So I'll just call it YouTube demo. And then inside of the folder you can just put files, and so you can upload files. Basically anything here. I can use redundant storage or encryption if I want. I can also set permissions, or I can make everything public. I can associate metadata, and then I just start the upload. And you can see now this is done. It's really just a file system. So I can set the properties, and you can see this is just the same information that we saw before. Now if I go up a level, then you can see on the bucket I have more types of permissions. I can do things like host a website, there's the website, log, version, and in terms of lifecycle, I can set to automatically archive. So I can do a whole bucket or a prefix, and I can archive or delete, and archive to Glacier after however many days. And then I can make a rule, next day archive. And then I can do rule configuration on specific objects and then activate the rule. I'm not going to do that, but you can. You can set requester pays, and then just to go inside of here and show you again, I can also take this file and I can make it public if I want to. So if I wanted to make this public, I can make public, and then this becomes an RSS feed. If we go to the properties, then see this is literally a URL, and I can just click on it and then I can download it. So super simple. Now Glacier, if I go to look at Glacier, there isn't too much I can see here. You can see I have a vault and there's not too much I can see. I can't upload or download. I can set notifications. So the tool that I use is called Fast Glacier, which is this thing right here. It's a freeware for personal use. And you can see inside of here I've got my bucket, and I can actually see inside. If I wanted to make a new folder, I can make a new folder. If I wanted to upload something, I could upload. And if I wanted to download something, I could download. And it tells me my charges, because there's more charges when you're coming out than when you're going in. And it's a lot slower too. So the other thing that I can do is I can look at my vault, and I can get an inventory, and I can compare. So it's a nice little tool, and you can see they've got a queuing thing here, a logging thing. It's called Fast Glacier. I can go inside of the Visual Studio, and I can see that I think it was this one, and I can browse, and I can work with S3. Yeah, there it is inside of here, and I can do any of the things that I did from inside of here, which you might do as developers. All right, the next thing is a specialized type of EC2 instance. This is called Relational Data Service. So the idea is a relational database that's partially managed on an EC2 instance. It costs a little bit more, and the reason is that it's triple replicated, and some of the management is done for you, like backing up and some of the other maintenance stuff. So you can pick MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, or SQL Server. SQL 2014 is not yet available, but it will be shortly. So 2012 is the biggest thing you can get with this now. So let me show you what that looks like. And let's look at RDS. So in RDS, basically what you're doing here is you've got instances, reserved instances as well, but you don't have Spot. And then you can say launch an instance. So you pick your engine, and let's do standard. And the way the licensing works here is either bring your own license or license included. So bring your own license, and you have 10 or 11. And you say the instance class, and let's do a large. And then you don't have multi-availability zone for this one. And then you have some other things. You can say allocated storage. And then you can use provisioned IOPS. This is your throughput. Okay, so let's 10 IOPS per gigabyte of storage. So let's do 2000. And then we have to give it an instance identifier and a username and password. Okay, and the database port, we can put it in a VPC, we can put an availability zone if we want, an option group, we need a security group. So we can say automatic backups, yes or no, the retention period, the backup window, the maintenance window. If we say no, and we want to review the options, and we want to launch. Notice we can take snapshots of the database, and it tells us that there's caching available, Memcache or Redis, if we want to add some caching. And so now this is creating. Notice as the instance is spinning up that the status is going to backing up. All right, now you can see the instance is available. Now what you can do is you can connect with Management Studio, so there's your endpoint right there, or you can connect inside of Visual Studio, so we're going to do that. So you can see here's our log. And we can add this to SQL Server Explorer, Server Explorer. It tells us that we have to add a firewall rule here, which we're going to go ahead and do. And then here we're logging in, and we have to put in our username and password. Actually, I'm going to test the connection. There we go. And I'm going to say OK. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to create a database. So now I'm going to go ahead and connect. And I'm just going to put in the test the connection. And then I'll see that I have the database that I made. And I can do regular development through Visual Studio or Management Studio if I wanted to. And just like with everything else, you can go ahead and work with this thing. When you're done with it, you can reboot it. Notice you can't pause it unlike EC2, okay? And then I can say delete. Create a snapshot, yes or no, and I'll call it YouTube snapshot and say OK. And there it's deleting. So just to recap, a difference between RDS on EC2 and SQL Server on EC2. RDS costs more because you can have provision IOPS, performance guarantees, scheduled backups, point-in-time restores, scheduled maintenance windows, and it's a great solution for semi-managed SQL Server because you can get all your tools, unlike even Microsoft's own implementation. And it does support availability groups and enterprise. Also, Amazon's working on support for SQL Server 2014 and RDS, and they'll be announcing that pretty soon. Don't quite have it yet. So the next step in terms of data is if you want to go in your relational store, but you want to go beyond SQL Server because of the licensing and the costs. So Amazon has this unique offer called Redshift. And what it is, it's a relational data store. It's based on Postgres that's optimized for read-only workloads. So it's set up like a column store. And there is some considerations when you load it up, but the thing that's so significant is it's relational. So you get to do relational queries, SQLite queries, and it's super cheap. So to spin up a Redshift cluster, you just go back to the main console here, and you're going to launch your cluster. So I'm going to call it Lin YouTube, if I can spell it right. Call it YouTube. The master username, same as usual. Okay, and then you're going to continue. And then you want to say what instances, because again, you're on EC2. So do you want large, extra large, or huge? So I'll just take that one, I guess. And then the I/O performance, it also shows you here. You can see like very high to moderate. See? All right, and then the cluster type, you can do a single node just for testing, or you can do multi-node, and you can have up to 32 for this one. So let's do like 3. That's going to be 3 EC2 instances. Notice you're going to connect with ODBC or JDBC. And then here's your group. You can say if it's encrypted or not. HSM connections. You can use VPCs. You can set up availability zones. And then here's your security. You can set up CloudWatch alarms for your disk usage threshold. And then you can get a SNS message. Somebody has to get an alarm, basically. And notice it says that you'll start accruing charges, and it costs $2.55 an hour and launch. And then you can view your cluster on the cluster's dashboard. Now there's a section inside of AWS documentation that helps you load some data, and the idea is you load the data out of S3. Okay, you'll notice that now this cluster is available. As with RDS, you can see that we have the endpoint here, and we can use that to configure our tool. So I'll do that when I connect. And I'll just pause while I do that. And you can see I've added the information from the database properties into the connection profile here. And I'm just going to click OK. And then I could use my tool to query. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So the best way to get started with Redshift after you've connected, and you have to set your firewall rule again, just like you did with RDS, is go ahead and use their AWS documentation. And here I'll just show it to you really quick, like this. And create the tables as I'm going to do, and then load the data from S3. So let me just go ahead and copy the script to create these tables and execute it. And after you've created the tables, the second part is to load the data from S3. So again, if you just follow their documentation, okay, it took me a couple minutes to get my access keys, but this is the general pattern. You copy from the local bucket from a text file, and here I've got several of them, and you can see they're in progress right now, but some of them have as many as 50,000 rows. And I'm just loading up some data schema, and then I can execute some queries. So I can show you what Redshift looks like. So once this finishes, I'll execute a couple queries, and then we'll go back to the console so I can show you how you can monitor and expand your cluster. Okay, now everything's loaded, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in the next query, and I'll just get that ready. And you can see here's some just basic queries that I'm going to go ahead and run. Let me put this in here so you guys can see it. And here you can see the results, and there's the statements coming back. 1, 2, just sort of typical data warehouse statements here. Okay, you can see there's the results, and there's the messages. And then here, back on the cluster, I can see the configuration, the nodes. I can modify, resize, delete or reboot the cluster. I can configure logging. I can set backup snapshots, cross-region snapshots. Here's my status. I can turn on CloudWatch alarms, % used. I can add more, of course. And then here's my performance monitoring. There's, you can just, it's a snapshot of the CPU network, so you can figure out read write, because I was loading there, read latency, database connections, so on and so forth. Obviously, % used. You can monitor by the period, the average, the minimum, max. Here for the queries, you can see the queries, how long they took. Then I can go and drill in here, and I've got an explain plan, and I can see for this specific query the overhead, so I can do optimizations. The optimizing is a little bit different in Redshift. There's the explain plan. One of the things that's super cool about this, I'm just going to come back to that I guess, is on the cluster, if I want to say resize, I can just go like this, and I can say, obviously you don't want to make it too small, but I can say, all right, I want 5 nodes, and I can resize it, and it's going to dynamically resize. And then when we have 5, it just spreads the data across. So it does matter how you load the data. You want to follow the documentation, but it's a super powerful service that I wanted to show you. So now you can see that we have 5 nodes, so I'm just going to go ahead and reestablish my connection and then re-query the data. And then I'm going to rerun my query, and you can see all 4 query results ran again. And now I could just go back again, and I could do a comparison, and I could look at the difference in using 3 nodes versus 5. So it's super easy, and it's a service I really like, and so I wanted to take some time to show you how easy it is to work with it. And of course you can instrument the application and connect with the command line if you want to have your own sort of metrics rather than the ones that they provide here, or you want to see them a different way or something. So that is Redshift. It's a really core and key service. One thing I'll tell you is you want to make sure and turn it off as well, because it's expensive, and if you leave on a test instance, I've had several customers forget to turn it off, you can run up a lot of charges. So I'm going to go ahead and just close my connection here, and then I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to delete my cluster. So the next service for us to take a look at is DynamoDB. This is sort of the opposite of Redshift. This is often used for OLTP. It's like a huge hash map. It's a key value store, and it's a more like a wide column actually. And it runs on SSDs. So it's just super simple. You pick your primary key, set your throughput, and create your table with alarms. So it's a real easy thing to set up. So I'll show you what that looks like. So to create a database in DynamoDB, you just go to the console and go to DynamoDB and click Create Table. I'll call it Customers. You're going to pick your hash attribute type. I'm going to call it Customer ID. And the range attribute, I'll call it Customer Date. I'll actually call it customer region. Of course, you can do string, number, or binary, and you should read the documentation on this to suit your business case. And then you can specify indexes. You can define indexes at table creation. You can't change them later, but you can do secondary indexes and local indexes. So again, you want to read the docs on this. If you don't want any indexes, you can just click Next. Next, you want to say your read capacity and write capacity. If you don't know what that is, you can use their calculator and just make some really small number here. And as with the other data services we've looked at, there's alarms built in, same type of concept. It says no indexes, and that's it. It's super easy. And once it's created, then you can manipulate it through here, but usually obviously you hook this to an application and you write the data in from an application and read it out. But I'll show you for completeness once it's created what it looks like. All right, here it is. So we can explore the table, create it, modify, delete, import, export, access control, or purchase reserved capacity. So if we want to explore the table, we can put something in. So customer ID 1, customer region California, and then I could say add attribute, and then I can put an item. Say OK, and then I can browse, and I can scan, and there's my item. So again, it's like super simple. And there's my various tables. So really that's all there's to it. Again, just like everything else, when you're done testing, make sure you delete your table because this thing can rack up a lot of charges as well. So let's go here and let's delete the table. Very simple. And we're going to say delete. So the sort of top of the line here is if you're doing true big data projects, and this has been a use case I've had with some customers as well, you might want to just do Hadoop MapReduce on Amazon. And the most common thing I'm having is log processing. So it's sort of like a new ETL where it's just cheaper to have the scalability of the HDFS file system and the ease of MapReduce, because you can scale it out to lots and lots of nodes. Kind of like with Redshift, you get the data out of the S3 bucket and then you pull it in to do MapReduce. And then the difference is when it's done, you put the results back into the S3 bucket. So it really is just a bunch of EC2 instances that do the work for you, do the heavy lifting. Let me show you how this works. So you go to the analytics section and you go to Elastic MapReduce. Now in this one I could create a new cluster, but I have one from another demo. So one of the things that I can do is I can just clone this cluster. And if I want to look at the details and see if it's one that I want to clone, then you can see that I've got, this is the AMI version. So this is the EC2 AMI. This is the Hadoop distribution. I put on some libraries for Hadoop, Hive, Pig, and the new Impala. And then here's the logging bucket that I already set up. There's the availability zone. So you can dynamically basically spin up these processing clusters is really what this thing is. And then bootstrap actions are things that happen while it's being spun up. And in my case, I chose to install Impala, which is the in-memory column store, which is part of the Hadoop distributions now. So if I want to do that, I could just say clone. Notice just like Redshift, you can resize. And I'll actually just make a new one so you guys can see how it works. So I'll say create cluster, and I'll call this one YouTube Lin. Termination protection, yes or no. So if it accidentally gets deleted, no, I don't want that. Enabled, I don't really want logging, so I don't care about that. Notice if you have logging, you can have debugging. And then you can have tags. And then you set your software configuration. So you can say either an Amazon, Hadoop, AMI, and you can go from 2.1.4 to 3.1.0. Now if you pick the one that's the most stable, then you get Hive and Pig libraries. Of course, you can also use the MapR distribution if you want, which is a commercial distribution. And then you can also add HBase or Ganglia. I'm not familiar with Ganglia, but HBase. If you pick one of the newer versions, then you can add Impala. And then you can say, all right, do you want to launch into what kind of EC2? So EC2 Classic, or if you had VPCs, if you had some configuration, you could do that. Say your availability zone, your size of instances, and then notice right here, request spot. This is super important because, of course, spot instances, if you say request spot, then you put your bid price of how much you want to pay. And then if that becomes, if they have compute that's not being used, if you say, I want to pay this much per hour for this size, then this will turn on if that compute is available. So that's the way spot works. So another thing people will do is sometimes for a task, they'll request spot because then they can dynamically speed up their workloads. So that just is a use case that I've seen. So then you set your security and then your bootstrap actions, and then you can set your steps. That's a unit of work, and these are jar files, and your jars are going to be in S3. And you can say, do you want to have something, streaming? Do you want a custom jar? What is it that you want to do, right? You also can do auto terminate, which means after the cluster is done, then automatically terminate it. So what happens is the output goes to S3 and then it just turns off basically. So the one thing that you also can do when you're starting is you can use a sample application. So they've got various ones here, contextual advertising, word count is sort of the quintessential one. Then you've got some log stuff too. So if we wanted to do word count, then we would, and I have to put in a bucket that I have. And one of the things when you're testing, you can see terminated with errors, the streaming output directory already exists. So I need to go ahead and change this because HDFS, it's not immutable. So you have to have a new name. All right, I had a couple tries, false starts here because I had forgot that you need to have the bucket created, but not the folder. If the folder is already created in S3, then this will fail. So now you can see that it's starting and it's provisioning, configuring the cluster software. So I've got a really small Hadoop instance going here with just one master, 2 core. But yeah, that was something I forgot about. You can't have the folder or it'll fail on the creation because it's immutable. So once this finishes, then we'll take a look at what it looks like. And now you can see that the job is running, and we'll check in again after it's completed to see the output. So now you can see that the cluster is terminated and the steps are completed, and I can go and look at the log, and I see I got a success. And there you can see the words. It's not really formatted very well, but you can see that it's separated out the words and counted them. Now, a new service that was introduced, and I believe it's US only at this point, is something called Kinesis, and this is for real-time big data streams. So the idea is, like it says here, is that you have shards. So you get the number of shards based on the amount of data. So this would be like data coming from sensors. Then data from, as it says, many producers can be written to the stream. And then data processing apps can consume the stream, and the idea is real-time insights. So I'll show you what this looks like. So here's Kinesis, and you just go and click Create Stream. And again, like with DynamoDB, you can have help with the number of shards. And I got a little aggressive there, so let me just see if that'll do it. Okay, and there's my stream. And again, this is kind of like Glacier, where it creates an object that you can see in the console, but you don't really do anything with it because you're going to interact with this programmatically, kind of like DynamoDB or for dynamic key value data storage, or Glacier for archival storage. It's an endpoint, really, in a lot of ways. It's an endpoint to a service. So now you can see this is active. So let's go ahead and kind of similar to the other monitoring, we can see what's coming in just from a really high level. I mean, this is a very simple sort of an interface. What you really are going to do is you're going to program against the stream using .NET API or whatever API you're using. All right, when you're putting all these different data services together, you might want to automate some of the data flows. You might remember that a lot of things come in from S3 and go to either Redshift or MapReduce or someplace like that. And Amazon introduced last year this service called a data pipeline that allows you to, as it says, define data nodes, schedule compute activities, and then monitor. So it's kind of like a super SSIS, if you will. So let me show you what that looks like. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll call this YouTube demo. And you can run your pipeline on a schedule or on activation. So, and then you can set your security roles. Okay, so basically it's a job scheduler. So say create. Now inside of here you have data nodes, schedules, activities, resources, preconditions. Again, it's kind of like an SSIS or some kind of job runner. You can see cron jobs, time series jobs, and then you have errors or warnings, how you deal with it. You know, this is a whole topic unto itself, so I think the easiest thing to do is just to look at the templates. So these are the most common sort of things. So you can see export S3 to Dynamo, S3 to RDS, RDS to S3, run Hive Analytics, copy on-premise MySQL to RDS, cross-region DynamoDB, or copy to Redshift. So since we're taking a look at Redshift, let's take a look at that. And you can see you'd fill in this information. Of course, we don't have a Redshift cluster, so I probably won't end up doing this one. We don't have any of this stuff set up, so I guess this would be an easy one. So say close. Okay. So now inside of here you have your S3 node, and then you configure this. Okay, so here's your S3 node, and what you would do in here is, you would say, whatever, my customer data, and then, what kind of node it was, and then where's your schedule, if there's a precondition, where it comes from, and then add an optional field. So again, you have a lot of SSIS or data pipeline, activities that you can add on fail, on success, so on and so forth, retries. And then here's your job. So you can say what it's doing. This is an EMR activity, so here are the types of activities. Activities are like SSIS tasks, so copy, EMR, Hive, Pig, and you can actually write your own shell, SQL. So this is an elastic MapReduce activity. So in this case, we'd want a DMR, I think. Well, let's just do a copy. And then you have to say to what location. So let me put this back. And then you put to the Dynamo node. Now if you wanted to add a data node, you just say what type of data it is. So again, you want Redshift, it's a Redshift node, and then you just wire it all together. So I showed you the integration with Visual Studio with the SDK. One thing that I want to show you as well is there's PowerShell. So the way the PowerShell works is there's AWS tools for PowerShell. So I'm just going to show you how that works really quick. So first of all, when you download the SDK, you get this local documentation that has a sample pack, API reference, the Visual Studio tools, and it has the PowerShell guide. And then I'm going to go over here and bring up the tools. And so now we have PowerShell, and it shows me which credentials I have here. If I want to see which version, I just see which PowerShell version. And then if I want to see what services are available, you can see that you can work with Redshift and Kinesis, import-export, data pipelines, all that good stuff through PowerShell as well. And again, we have a big section of documentation here. And I showed you the SDK in Visual Studio already. So there's a lot of comparable services by vendor, and obviously this talk is about Amazon. I've got other talks on Google and Microsoft and even other cloud vendors because I'm a cloud architect and I don't specifically deploy on Amazon. So this chart gives you a comparison. So I'll just give you a minute to take a look at it. And of course you can get my slides as well. I do encourage you to start with the free tier, and you can see for the data services, this is some of the free tier options that are available. Some of the services that I showed today don't have free tier. Another thing that you want to do with Amazon, I'm actually going to show you this, is the billing section. You can see that I have a cost explorer where I can look at the services. So I've been doing some with Kinesis testing, and I can see over time if I want to put this year. You can see that I also did some other services as well, and I do most of my work on EC2 on this particular account. So this is under billing and cost management. So that's a good place for you to check. Another thing I want to make you aware of is that you can make billing alerts, and you can set billing alarms for different services, which I highly recommend that you do. Like I set a really low threshold on this because this is my demo account and I don't want to forget to turn anything off. So you literally just click create alarm, and then you say what you want to have it on, and then like what's your threshold, and then you get notified if you go over it. So again, I have given talks on pricing. It's really important that you understand the different pricing options. Particularly with EC2, I see a lot of customers that don't use all the pricing options that are available. If you're an enterprise customer, part of Amazon's enterprise service is to analyze your bill, and you should take advantage of that because they want to keep you on Amazon, so they'll try and save you money. So here are the ways that I use Amazon. That's the way I was showing today, and I hope that you got a good overview to it and you're ready to try out some of these services. In addition to the work I do professionally as a big data and cloud architect, I also run a nonprofit that offers free and open source courseware and teacher training materials that is designed to introduce middle school age children to programming. Our core offering is in Java because that's what they teach in U.S. high schools, if anything. We do have some other languages though as well, Small Basic, C#, and more. So it's designed to be done with kids ages 10 and up. So teach the next generation. So I'm just going to finish up. You can get a hold of me via Twitter. It's just my name. I have over 150 different screencasts on YouTube around big data topics, so subscribe. Also, to get access to some of the other AWS services, if you're watching this, contact me through social media or Twitter, and I can send you a $100 AWS usage credit so that you can get started. So I'm Lynn Langett. Have a great day.